Hello and welcome to CareerRight.com. Myself Nishant, and in this section I am going to cover .NET tutorial. Introduction to .NET. The .NET framework is a development framework that provides a new programming interface for developing different type of application such as web application, Windows application, web services, mobile application, Windows Presentation Foundation applications, Windows Communication Foundation, Windows Workflow Foundation, and many more. The key component of .NET Framework are the Common Language Runtime and the .NET Framework class library, which includes ADO.NET, ASP.NET, Windows Form, and Windows Presentation Foundation. Objectives of .NET. Objective of .NET is to provide a consistent object-oriented programming environment, is to minimize software deployment and versioning conflict, to provide consistent environment for developing different type of applications such as Windows-based applications, web-based applications, Windows Communication Foundation, to provide language interoperability, and to provide language independency. The .NET Framework goals: language independence, reliability, security, simplified development, and language interoperability. Language independence. .NET supports language independence. That means you can develop the application using any one of dozens of different languages, including the following: COBOL, Fortran, JavaScript, Perl, Pascal, PHP, Python, Smalltalk, etc. Reliability. There are many programming languages and platforms in the commercial software industry, but few of them attempt to provide both a reliable and secure language. .NET provides type safety. The object class is the most base class. Every class in .NET is derived from object class. It supports basic features such as returning a string representation of the object, indicating whether the object is equal to another, and so on. The CLR recognizes and verifies types before they can be loaded and executed. This decreases the chance for programming errors and prevents buffer overruns, which can be a security weakness. Security. .NET provides number of security features. It also provides code access security. Simplified development. Each time when you want to develop something in a different compiler, you had to learn a few API or a class library because there is no consistency among these different libraries or interfaces. .NET solves this problem. .NET solves this problem by providing a set of framework classes that every language uses. Such a framework removes the need for learning a new API each time you switch languages. Language interoperability. .NET support not only language independence but also language integration. This means you can create one class in VB and inherit it in another class that is created in C#. You can also take advantage of polymorphism across different languages. The .NET framework makes this possible with a specification called Common Type System (CTS), which all .NET components must support. .NET Framework. The .NET Framework consists of Common Language Runtime and the .NET Framework class library. The Common Language Runtime is the foundation of .NET Framework. The CLR manages and executes code written in .NET languages and is the basis of the .NET architecture. The Common Language Runtime is just what its name says. It is runtime that is usable by different programming languages. The core features of the CLR are memory management, assembly loading, security, exception handling, threading. These features are available to all programming languages that run under the CLR. For example, the runtime uses exceptions to report errors. So all the languages that target the runtime also get errors reported via exceptions. Code that target the runtime is known as managed code, while code that doesn't target the runtime is known as unmanaged code. Class library. The class library is an object-oriented collection of reusable types that you can use to develop applications from simple to web forms and XML web services. The class library is organized in a hierarchy of namespaces. Namespaces are the logical grouping of related types. It reduces the chance of name collisions. For example, all the classes related to working with the file system are located in the system.io namespace. All the classes for working a Microsoft SQL Server database are located in the system.data.sql client namespace. Metadata. Metadata means data about data. It includes type definition, version information, external assembly references. Metadata is a set of data tables that describe what is defined in the module, such as types and their members. In addition, metadata also has tables indicating what the managed module references, such as imported types and their members. Assemblies. Assemblies are the building block of .NET framework. It is a self-describing component. Assemblies may or may not be executable. They might exist as the executable file or dynamic link library file. All the .NET assembly contain the definition of types, versioning information for the type, metadata, and manifest. There are two kinds of assemblies in .NET: private, shared. Private assemblies. A private assembly is used only by a single application and is stored in that application's root directory. Shared assemblies. It is also called strong name assemblies. Shared assembly are located in the global assembly cache. Shared assembly must contain strong name. A shared assembly can be used by more than one application. For all the calling assemblies within the same application, the same copy of the shared assembly is used from its original location. That's why shared assemblies are not copied in the private folder of each calling assembly. Assembly contents. An assembly can consist of 4 elements: the assembly manifest, which contains assembly metadata, type metadata, Microsoft Intermediate Language, and a set of resources. Assembly manifest. Assembly is a self-describing component, means all the information that needed to reference it are kept in assembly itself. The part of manifest are identity, a list of files, a list of referenced assemblies, and a set of permission requests. Introduction of ASP.NET. ASP.NET is a technology for building web pages and website using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and server scripting. You can develop ASP.NET applications in any .NET compatible language, including VB.NET, C#, JScript.NET, etc. ASP.NET web pages are known as web forms, are the main building block for application development. The extension of web pages is .ASPX. ASP.NET controls. There are 3 families of controls and they are as follows. HTML controls. These are standard controls and they are part of HTML language. These are not classes, but they are tags. We can only do client-side programming with them. HTML server controls. These are same as HTML controls, but they have run at server attribute. With the HTML server controls, we can do server-side programming. If you want to convert old ASP application into ASP.NET application, then HTML server control is used. Web controls. These are .NET classes and they have rich set of properties, methods, and events. They are programmable on client side as well as server side. ASP.NET provides rich set of controls. These controls can be divided into following groups: standard controls, validation controls, rich controls, data controls, navigation controls, and login controls. Life cycle of an ASP.NET web page. The life cycle starts when a user requests a web page through the browser. The web server then processes the page through the step-by-step events before returning the result back to the user's browser. These processing stages define the life cycle of a web page. Page lifecycle events. Pre-init. This event is used if you need to set values such as master page or theme dynamically. Init. It fires after each control has been initialized. You can use this event to change initialization values for controls. Init complete. This event fires once all initialization of the page and its control have been completed. Preload. It raises before view state have been loaded. It raises before view state has been loaded for the page and its control, and before postback processing. It can be used when you need to write code after the page is initialized, but before the view state has been wired back up to the controls. Load. This event is raised when the web page and its control are initialized. Page load event typically checks for postback and then sets control property appropriately. Control postback events. Any event on the page or its control that caused the postback to occur This might be a buttons click event or some other event. Load complete. In this event, all the controls are loaded properly. Pre-rendered. This event takes place before saving view state. So any changes made here are saved. Save state complete. Before this event, the view state of the page and its control is set. Any changes to the page control at this point or beyond that are ignored. Render. It generates the client-side HTML. Unload. This is the last event of ASP.NET web page. You can write cleanup code in this event. Understanding view state. View state persists state across postback. For example, if you assign a value to a label control's text property, the label control retains the value across multiple page requests. It is a hidden form field named _view state. This hidden form field contains the value of the control's property. When the page is posted back to the server, the ASP.NET Framework gets the value of all the properties stored in view state. In this way, the ASP.NET Framework preserves the state of control properties across postbacks to the web server. By default, view state is enabled for every control. The view state hidden form field can become very large. Storing too much data into view state can slow down the rendering of a page because the content of the hidden page must be pushed back and forth between the web server and browser. Understanding the Page.IsPostBack property. The page class includes a property called the isPostBack property, which you can use to detect whether the page has already been posted back to the server. Its return type is Boolean. Page load event is fired every time when you request a page through the firing of event or some other ways. So if you have done some coding in page load event, it will be initializing every time. If you remove the isPostBack property from the page load method, then you will not get the desired result. The drop-down list always displays its first item as the selected item. Required field validator. It enables you to check whether a user has entered a value in a form field. Range validator. It enables you to check whether a value falls between a certain minimum and maximum value. Compare validator. It enables you to compare a value against another value or perform a data type check. Regular expression validator. It enables you to compare a value against a regular expression. Custom validator enables you to perform custom validation. Validation summary enables you to display a summary of all validation errors in a page. Required field validator. You can create a field as a mandatory field by adding a required field validator control to the page and linking it to the required control. For example, you can specify that users must fill in a name text box before they can submit a registration form. Compare validator. You can perform 3 different types of validation tasks by using compare validator control. You can perform a data type check. You can compare the value entered into a form field against a fixed value. You can compare the value of one form field against another. Range validator. The range validator control provides the facility to check whether the value of a form field falls between a certain minimum and maximum value. It verifies that user input is within a specific range of values. Regular expression validator. The regular expression validator control performs its validation according to the regular expression. A regular expression is a powerful pattern matching language that can be used to identify simple and complex character sequences. You can check a predefined pattern such as a phone number, postal code, email address, dates, and so on. The control uses the validation expression property to set a valid regular expression that is applied to the data that is to be validated. Validation summary. The validation summary control allows you to summarize the error messages from all validation controls on a web page in a single location. This control is particularly useful when working with large forms. If a user enters the wrong value for a form field located towards the end of the page, then the user might never see the error message. If you use the validation summary control, you can always display a list of errors at the top of the form. Custom validator. Custom validator control enables you to create your own validation, and that validation can run with the other validation control on the page. The custom validator control performs validation based code you write. You can write validation code that will be executed on the client side using JavaScript or with server-side validation. ASP.NET State Management. HTTP is a stateless protocol, which means a new instance of web page class is recreated each time the page is posted to the server. It is a communication protocol which is implemented in the World Wide Web. It is a request-response style protocol. Client will request to a server and the server respond to these requests. Since HTTP is a stateless, managing a state in web application is challenging. State management techniques are used to maintain user state throughout the application. The following are the commonly used state management techniques: view state, control state, hidden fields, cookies, query strings, application state, session state, and profile properties. Storing information on the client has the following advantages. Better scalability. If a website has thousands of simultaneous users, the memory consumed by storing state management information can be limited. Storing the information to the client removes this problem and frees the server to use its resources to serve more requests. Supports multiple web servers. With client-side state management, you can distribute incoming requests across multiple web servers. Storing information on the server has the following advantages. Better security. Client-side state management information can be captured and maliciously modified. Therefore, we should never use client-side state management to store confidential information such as password, authorization label, or authentication status. Reduced bandwidth. If you store large amount of state management information, sending that information from client to server can increase bandwidth utilization and page load times, that potentially increasing your cost and reducing scalability. Server-based state management. Application state, session state, and profile properties all store data in memory on the server. Application state. Application state is an instance of the HTTP application state class. It is a global storage mechanism, thus you can access application state data from all pages in the web application. So application state is useful for storing information that needs to be maintained between the server round trips and between requests for pages. Application events. Application start, application end, application error, application log request, and application post log request. Session state. ASP.NET Session State enables you to store and retrieve values for a user as the user navigates ASP.NET pages. It is secure, transparent from users, and we can store any kind of object within it. Session object is an instance of the HTTP Session State class. Advantages and disadvantages of session. Advantages. It helps to maintain user state and data to all over the application. It can store any kind of object. It stores every client data separately. Session is secured and transparent from user. Disadvantages. Performance overhead in case of large volume of user. Because session data is stored in server memory. Overhead involved in serializing and deserializing session data. Because in case of state server and SQL Server session mode, we need to serialize the object before store. Session mode. The following session modes are available in ASP.NET. In prog, state server, SQL Server, and custom. Introduction to master pages. ASP.NET master pages allow you to create a consistent layout for the pages in your application. A single master page defines the look and feel and a standard behavior that you want for all the pages in your website. A master page can serve as a template for one or more web forms. Advantages of using master pages. They allow you to centralize the common functionality of your pages so that you can make updates in just one place. They make it easy to create one set of controls and code and apply the result to a set of pages. For example, you can use controls on the master page to create a menu that applies to all pages. They provide an object model that allows you to customize the master page from individual content pages. You can easily access the property and control that is available on master pages. The basic step to reference master page property from a control page are as follows. Create a property in the master page code behind file. Add the master type directive to the .aspx content page and use the attribute visual path. Reference the master page property from the content page using the syntax master property name. Working with ADO.NET. With the release of .NET Framework, Microsoft introduced a new data access model called ADO.NET. The 5 major objects in ADO.NET are connection, command, data reader, dataset, data adapter. Connection. The connection object is responsible for establishing and maintaining the connection to the data source. Command. The command object stores the query that is to be sent to the data source and any applicable parameters. Data reader. The data reader object provides fast forward only and read only object. It is connection oriented. Dataset. The dataset object is the collection of objects. It contains data table, data row, data relation, etc. It provides a storage mechanism for disconnected data. It is like an in-memory repository to store data that has been retrieved. Data adapter. The data adapter object works as a bridge between dataset and data source. The data adapter is responsible for retrieving the data from the command object and populating the dataset with the data returned. It uses the fill method to populate the dataset. If you are working with Microsoft SQL Server, then you must include the following namespace: system.data, system.data.sql client. Connection objects. The main use of connection object is to provide connection to a data source. A connection object does not fetch or update data. It does not execute queries, and it does not contain the results of queries. It is a place where you can provide the connection string. Important properties of connection object: connection string, database, data source, and state. Connection string. It gets or sets the string used to open the connection. Database. Gets the name of the current database after a connection is opened. Data source. Gets the name of the database server to which it is connected. State. Gets the state of the connection. Command object. Command object is used to execute SQL statements and stored procedure against a database. Command object contains the necessary information to execute SQL statements, stored procedures, functions, and so on. Important properties of command object: command text, command type, connection, parameters, and transaction. Command set. Set command object to any valid SQL statement or name of any valid stored procedure. The command type value determines the manner of execution. Command type set to either SQL statement or stored procedure. Connection. Set this to connection object. Parameter collection. When running parameterized queries or stored procedure, you must add parameter objects to this collection. Transaction. The SQL transaction within which the SQL command executes. Important methods of command object: execute non-query, execute reader, execute scalar, execute XML reader. Execute non-query. This method is used if you are using insert, update, or delete SQL statement. Its return type is integer. This indicates the number of affected rows. Execute reader. This method is used if you are using select SQL statement. Its return type is DataReader. Execute scalar. If you need to return a single value from a database query, you can use the execute scalar method. This method always returns the value of the first column from the first row of the result set. Its return type is object. Execute XML reader. Returns XML formatted data. Returns a system.xml.xml reader object. Data reader object. The data reader object provides a connection oriented data access to the data source. Data reader object is fast forward only, read only, retrieval of query results from the data source. It is not used to update the data. When you start to read from a data reader, it should always be open and positioned prior to the first row. The read method in the data reader is used to read the rows from data reader, and it always moves forward to a new valid row if any row exists. Important properties of data reader object: connection, field count, has rows, is closed, records affected. Important methods of data reader object: close, next result, read, and get value. The data reader cannot be created directly from code. They can create it only by calling executeReader method of a command object. Working with DataSet object. DataSet is a disconnected in-memory representation of data. It can contain multiple data tables from different databases. Caching application pages and data. The main issue with web-based development is performance. In ASP.NET, opening a database connection and retrieving data is a slow operation. The best way to improve the performance of your data access code is not to access the database at all. By taking advantage of caching, you can cache your database record in memory. Retrieving data from the cache, on the other hand, is faster. Caching is one of the best and often easiest way to improve the performance of an application. With caching, a copy of your data is stored in a location that can be accessed very easily. The idea with caching is that fetching data from the cache should be faster than fetching it from the original data source. Therefore, most caching solutions store data in memory, which is usually the fastest way to get the data. ASP.NET 3.5 framework supports the following type of caching: page output caching, partial page caching, data source caching, and data caching. Page output caching. Page output caching caches the entire page. It provides you to cache the entire rendered content of a page in memory. The next time any user requests the same page, the page is retrieved from the cache. You enable page output caching by adding output cache directive to a page. Caching multiple versions of a page. ASP.NET allows you to cache multiple versions of a page response declaratively by using attributes on the output cache directive, and it's vary by param attribute. Specifying the cache location. You can use location attribute of the output cache directive to specify where a web page will be created. Using partial page caching. Sometimes it is good to cache an entire page because some part of the page might need to change on each request. When a page contains both dynamic and static content, at that time partial page caching is a good choice. For example, you might need to cache a set of database record displayed in a page, but not cache a random advertisement displayed in the same page. By the use of user control, you can perform partial page caching. Data source caching. There are 4 standard ASP.NET data source caching: SQL data source, object data source, XML data source, and linked data source. The linked data source control does not support caching, but remaining 3 supports the data source caching. By default, caching is not enabled for the data source control, but you can enable it by setting the controls enable caching property to true. You have to specify cache duration property as well. The data is refreshed automatically based on the seconds you specify using the cache duration property. The data are cached in memory for a maximum of 1 hour. If you are not providing a value for the cache duration property, the default value is infinite. Data caching. ASP.NET provides a cache class that allows you to store objects that require a large amount of server resources to create in memory. Cache class use key value pair to store the data. You can place items in the cache and later retrieve them for use. The cache class provides an important method named insert. There are several overloaded versions of the insert method available. Cache dependency. Cache dependency enables you to set the dependency of the cache with some data that can be changed. So you can update or remove cache by setting the dependency of cache. There are 3 types of dependencies supported in ASP.NET: file-based dependency, key-based dependency, and time-based dependency. File-based dependency. File-based dependency comes in picture when particular cache item change is stored on the disk. ASP.NET expire cache data items from the cache when the dependency files changes. Key-based dependency. If you have saved multiple interrelated objects in the cache and if one of the object changes, you need to update or expire all of them. Key-based dependency checks a particular cache item when another cache item changes. Time-based dependency. Time-based dependency causes an item to expire at a defined time. ASP.NET provides 2 types of time-based dependency: absolute and sliding. Absolute. It provides time for a cache item to expire. The object will be expired from the cache at a particular time. If you don't need to specify a value for this property, use the static field cache.noAbsoluteExpiration. Sliding enables you to reset the time for the item in the cache to expire on each request. You can use sliding dependency when different requests are coming from the same item that are available in the cache. If you don't need to specify a value for this property, use the static field cache.noSlidingExpiration. ASP.NET Ajax. Ajax, asynchronous JavaScript and XML. It enables your client-side web pages to exchange data with the server through asynchronous calls. Ajax is a platform-independent technology that works with web applications. Every time a user performs some action on a page, the entire page will send to the server. Whenever you perform a postback, the page jumps and the user must wait until the page gets reconstructed. By using Ajax, you can create a refresh partial page without a full reload and without affecting other parts of the page. Traditional page processing. A user types the address of the required page in the address bar of the web browser and sends the request to the web server by using HTTP protocol. Web server processes the request and then sends a response back to the web browser. The HTTP protocol is used to send the HTTP response back to the web browser. The user's web browser then processes the response and renders the web page for display to the user. This process is repeated over and over during a typical web application session. For every postback, whole page is processed. Ajax page processing. By using Ajax, you can get flicker-free pages that enables you to refresh partial page without a full reload and without affecting other parts of the page. Ajax provides you rich client-side programming to access and modify data in your page. Benefits of ASP.NET Ajax. Benefits of ASP.NET Ajax. Partial page updates, client-side processing, desktop-like UI, improved performance, platform independency. Ajax server controls. These controls work in a similar fashion as other ASP.NET controls. You can drag and drop them onto your page. Each of these controls inherits from the system.web.ui.control class. The following are the ASP.NET Ajax server controls that come with ASP.NET: ScriptManager, ScriptManager Proxy, Timer, UpdatePanel, and Update Progress. ScriptManager control. If you want to use ASP.NET Ajax, then you must have a ScriptManager control. The ScriptManager control manages the communication between the client page and the server. It manages the JavaScript file used at the client and takes care of partial page updates. You can directly drag and drop this control on content page. It doesn't have a visual representation. It only used to manage Ajax processing. You cannot use more than one ScriptManager control on single web page. ScriptManager proxy control. The ScriptManager proxy control mainly used when we deal with master pages. The ScriptManager proxy control can be used by content pages that use a master page. The master page must have a ScriptManager control, otherwise you will get error. UpdatePanel control. UpdatePanel control is the most important control in Microsoft server-side Ajax framework. The UpdatePanel control enables you to update a portion of the page without updating the entire page. With partial page updates, you can post portion of a page to the server and only receive updates to those portions. The UpdatePanel control works as a container for other controls. Timer control. The ASP.NET Ajax timer control enables you to refresh an update panel in fixed time intervals. The timer control has one important property named interval. You can specify the amount of time in milliseconds. The default value is 60,000, equivalent to 1 minute. Update progress control. The update progress control allows you to show to the user that work is being done and that they will get results soon. You can show the status of the work done by using this control. Security, authentication and authorization. Authentication is the process that determines the identity of a user. Whenever a user logs onto an application, the user is first authenticated and then authorized. It is the process by which the system validates a user's login information. Authorization. Authorization determines whether a particular user should be granted access to a specific resource or not. You can say that it is the process of granting approval or permission on resources. The ASP.NET framework supports following types of authentication: Windows authentication, .NET Passport authentication, and Forms authentication. You can use these different authentication modes by applying the setting to the application's web.config file or in conjunction with the application server's IS instance. A web.config file is another XML-based configuration file that resides in the root directory of the web application. The setting applied in the web.config file overrides the same setting applied in the higher level machine.config file. These XML-based files enable you to easily change how ASP.NET behaves. You can enable a particular type of authentication for an application in an application's root web configuration file. We can have mode like Windows, Forms, Passport, and None. Windows. It is the default authentication mode in ASP.NET. Windows authentication is used together with IS authentication. Forms. The user provides his login information and submits the form. If the information is correct, then the system issues a form that contains the credentials or a key for getting the identity. Passport. A centralized authentication service provided by Microsoft that offers single login and core profile services for the member sites. MSN and Hotmail uses the Passport authentication. None. No authentication mode is applied. Windows authentication. Windows authentication is useful in an intranet environment. In a Windows-based authentication model, the requests go directly to IS to provide the authentication process. Forms-based authentication. Forms-based authentication authenticates the user who wants to access an entire application or a specific resource within an application. It is based on cookies where the username and passwords are stored either in a text file or database. After a user is authenticated, the user's credentials are stored in a cookie for use in that session. Passport authentication. It is a centralized service provided by Microsoft. Passport authentication allows user to create a single registration and get the same name and password to access any site that has implemented the passport authentication service. MSN and Hotmail uses the passport authentication. If you have done registration in MSN, then you can access Hotmail with same username and password without registering in Hotmail. Globalization. In general, we develop our application in US culture. But what if we want to sell our software when English language is not used? Globalization is the process of designing and developing applications that support for multiple cultures. So a program or an application can be used across multiple cultures and regions, no matter which language or culture is there. All the types are available in system.globalization namespace. Culture info class. This class enables you to get the culture information of a .NET application. You can retrieve and manipulate the culture information by using this class. This class mainly provides the information such as format of numbers and dates, casing conventions, culture's writing system, culture's calendar, culture's language. Culture can be divided into three categories: invariant culture, neutral culture, and specific culture. Invariant culture. This culture category is culture insensitive. You can use this culture when you are using dates or strings regardless of the culture's format. It will greatly simplify the task of comparing these dates or strings. Neutral culture. A neutral culture is represented with a language but has no relationship to countries or regions. The neutral culture will be designated by the first two characters. Specific culture. It is represented by a neutral culture, a hyphen, and then a specific culture abbreviation.